Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to another installment of Section 1, hosted by yours truly, Stefan Ramkisoon and Kyle Taklalsing. We have a jam-packed show for you guys today, starting with the forum. Today in the forum, we're going to be discussing two topics. One, the repatriation of our citizens, and number two, taxation and the role and effect it has on our democracy.
Two very important issues, especially that repatriation issue. I think a lot of people, especially in light of some comments that have come by a British MP, and the response or the retort to that by our Prime Minister, I think it has caused a lot of conversation in society about those citizens who are stranded abroad, and we probably need to have a little discussion on that today.
Yeah, it's a hot topic that we want to discuss, and we'll get into very shortly. In the segment Deposition, we have two individuals. One, Rhea Davidson from the Human Rights Committee of the Law Association of Trinidad and Tobago, and Mr. Francis Escaeg, one of the founders of Cause and Effect TT. They are here to discuss issues surrounding the disabled and the protection of law that will be afforded to them.
Yeah, disabled people, as you know, Stefan, they form a very vulnerable class in society.
Yes.
And sometimes, you know, it's always said that a measure for society and the humanity of a society is how we treat our vulnerable in society, the homeless, women, children, that sort of thing, so that there has to be a discussion about how we treat particularly with the disabled.
Yeah, correct. And secondly, we have a second guest in the deposition, and we are very honored to have this guy, to have this gentleman on, Mr. Gary Aboud from Fishermen and Friends of the City, Corporate Secretary. He will be with us to discuss the potential eco-disaster surrounding the potential submersion of the vessel that is off the coast of Trinidad and Tobago and Venezuela.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a sinking ship issue, certainly.
It's a sinking ship issue.
We need to discuss that as well.
Definitely.
Hopefully we get around to fully ventilating that issue, because it's a very serious issue.
Yes, and on our soapbox segment, we have a young man from the Hugh Wooden Law School, Kevin Lala. He will be discussing the issues of taxation on our economy. So we are looking forward to that event. And of course, after the soapbox, we'll be taking your calls. And we'll ventilate any questions that you have. We'll answer any questions that you guys have.
Yeah.
Yeah, so let's move straight on very, very swiftly into the first topic, and that is the repatriation of our citizens.
Repatriation.
Now, as Kyle said, this would have stemmed, now this has been an ongoing topic for quite some time now, but it has reared its head again, and it stemmed from a comment from a UK parliamentarian, Mr. Steve Baker. I'm sure that you guys have the video, Mr. Baker's video.
I think they're waiting to put it up. Well, to be fair, it's an issue that has arisen ever since the lockdown started.
The lockdown started, correct.
We've had citizens from all over the world who have been trying to get home. And of course, because of the government's position in relation to protecting our society, because of the spread of the COVID, and I assume not wanting to have those that may have been infected by the virus come into our jurisdiction, they've taken the drastic measure, I would say, or the very serious measure to close down our borders and to prevent a lot of citizens from getting home.
Yeah.
That has caused a lot of strife in society. We have a lot of citizens forming groups all over the world trying to get home. We understand that some citizens have been repatriated. I have personally already called for a systemic repatriation into the country.
Yeah.
I personally don't see why we can't have citizens tested,
Brought back in, maybe quarantined.
Tested probably before you leave.
Yeah.
Send the test, come in, quarantine, test again, and then repatriated into society. And it can't, and while there may be some effort or some process going on behind the scenes, it's certainly not transparent. People don't know.
Yeah.
We don't know how people are being selected for that. And that is no critique of the government. It may be because of medical information that they want to keep things confidential, and that's fine. But certainly citizens who want to apply need to know. And I think we may have the video.
Yeah.
Yeah, so let's just take a look at that to put some context on it.
Answer I gave the woman for Romford. Steve Baker. Number 4, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Trinidad and Tobago government decided to close its borders on the 22nd of March due to COVID-19, and they remain closed. Consular support for Trinidad and Tobago nationals remains the responsibility of their government. However, FCDO officials are in close contact with the Trinidad and Tobago authorities, and we advise all Trinidad and Tobago nationals to contact their High Commission in London for assistance.
Steve Baker. Speaker, I've got Trinidad and Tobago residents or citizens in my constituency burning through their savings, really terrified about failing to get home to protect their homes and their businesses from approaching severe weather. Could I ask the Minister if she'll join me in calling on Trinidad and Tobago to make sure their citizens get home? I think it's our common humanity to enable people to return to protect their homes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My honourable friend raises a very important point in relation to people who are in his constituency. The FCDO has alerted the Trinidad and Tobago High Commission to cases of stranded Trinidad and Tobago nationals that we have been made aware of, and supported affected individuals to contact the High Commission directly. It's also important to say that we are in regular contact with our counterparts in Trinidad and Tobago.
And there you have it, Mr. Steve Baker, one of the members of Parliament in the United Kingdom's Parliament, speaking about his constituents, his Trinidad constituents, and the problems that they are facing.
Yeah, now let's get it clear. Regardless of whatever views have been aired in the public domain or whatever, whoever has articulated certain views as to the bona fides of the statement, there is a problem and there is an actual situation where citizens are still stranded out of our jurisdiction and can't get back into Trinidad, can't get back to their homes, their businesses, and their family and loved ones. That's a fact.
And their situation, and the situation is even worse, where they are stranded and they have limited resources over there, and their resources are dwindling as we speak.
As he said, they're burning through savings, burning through resources, probably burning through the generosity of relatives and strangers.
Correct.
And so it's a real problem. And I don't want to get into the nitty-gritty of the debate, whoever to ask whatever question, if that is true.
Yeah.
That isn't for the discussion today. The discussion is simply whether or not it's a legal issue and how does it affect persons' democratic rights.
Yeah.
And Stefan, you know, as a lawyer, you know that citizenship generally and your rights as a citizen, they give you certain constitutional rights and freedoms.
Yeah.
And citizenship on the whole is a constitutional right and freedom.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that is where we're going into. I mean, what Kyle and I would have initially discussed is the law surrounding this issue, and the clear and unequivocal law. It's very clear. It's very clear. And what we have stated is, I mean, it's a common law right that every citizen has the right to re-entry into their country at will. And to re-enter, the right to re-enter engages your constitutional right of liberty and freedom of movement and private life, as Kyle has stated.
Yeah.
Now, what I have noted here, it's also a salient principle of international law that states a state is precluded from refusing its own nationals the right of entry or residence. Respect and adherence to international law is a rule of law issue, and Lord Bingham, Kyle will get into it. It's in his famous rule of law lecture on the rule of law indicated that in the international law. So we have to get into that point. It's a rule of law issue.
So it's three things. Being a citizen gives you certain rights. There is a common law right and remedy that all citizens are entitled to enter their country and to leave their country whenever they so desire. That right, that common law right, intersects with your constitutional rights of liberty, freedom of movement, and I would imagine also your right to your private life.
Yeah.
Your liberty, obviously, because you have to, it deals with your freedom, your personal freedoms. In terms of movement, obviously, because you're moving across borders, and private life, because you're being denied, if you're kept out of the jurisdiction, you're being denied the right to come home and enjoy your personal family rights and your right to your home and enjoy your home. Now, Stefan, there's a case, and we don't want to get overly technical on this show. You said that we don't want to get overly technical and come here and make legal submissions, but I thought it was very instructive, and we'll post the case up on our
Both cases
up on our
Facebook
site, right? There is a case in the Supreme Court of England. It's called Pham versus the Secretary of State and the Home Department. There are some, I want to just run through some very quick statements. This is a case out of the Supreme Court of England. And the comments are by Lord Mance, I believe. And I just wanted to read it quickly for you, right? This is what he had to say. Quoting from Blackstone's laws on England, he said, "A natural and regular consequence of personal liberty is that every Englishman," and of course you could transpose Englishman with Trinidadian here, "may claim a right to abide in his own country so long as he pleases, and not to be driven from it unless by sentence of law. The king, indeed, by his royal prerogative, may issue a writ of ne exat regnum and prohibit any of his subjects from going into foreign parts without license. But, and this is the important part, no power on earth except the authority of Parliament can send any subject of England out of the land against his will, not even as a criminal, for exile and transportation are punishments that are presently unknown in the common law.
Yeah.
The case also went on to say, for my part, I would certainly accept that a British subject enjoys a constitutional right to reside in or return to that part of the Queen's dominion of which he is a citizen. And then it goes on, the principle that every state must admit its own nationals to its territory is accepted so widely that its existence as a rule of law is virtually beyond dispute. I think I need to just say that again. The principle that every state being Trinidad and Tobago, must admit its own nationals to its territory is accepted so widely that its existence as a rule of law is virtually beyond dispute. And what he was alluding to there, it is so well accepted in the common law world that a citizen being allowed re-entry and being allowed to reside in his state, in his country, is so well known that it does not need to be stated.
It doesn't need to be ventilated.
It doesn't, and it also intersects with international law. As you said earlier, Stefan, international law has held that a state is precluded from refusing its own nationals the right of re-entry and residence. And that brings into question the whole issue of making a citizen stateless.
Yeah,
because
correct.
you've had issues in legitimate topics such as terrorism, where certain states have decided to renunciate citizenships of persons, and persons have been left stateless.
He went on further in that case, Kyle, and he stated this. This was the last part of the case that we have. A significant number of modern national constitutions characterize the right to enter one's own country as a fundamental or human right, and a long list is given.
So I don't think, and I think from what we've looked at, and I don't think it's really dispute, but I think we've done this so that the viewers understand how important a common law and constitutional and international law right, the right to return into your home, into your jurisdiction is. It's very important, and it's part of being a citizen. You call yourself a citizen in a sovereign democratic state because you enjoy these rights, and you can identify. And how do you identify? By coming home, spending time in your country. Yeah. So it's so important. Now, the question is, that has to be balanced. The question is, and even the judgment recognizes that Parliament may pass laws, Parliament may bring laws which can abrogate your rights, it can cut down some fundamental rights for the greater societal need. Yeah. So, therefore, we are facing a pandemic. Certainly there has to be some restriction. Certainly, in my view, when this epidemic started, we didn't know much about the virus. Things were very serious. We wanted to ensure that what was happening around the world in countries like Italy, America, etc., did not happen so fast and so badly in Trinidad and Tobago. And so the closure of the borders was a very harsh step. Some would say that it's justified and fine. Do those conditions still exist today to justify citizens being out of the country? What is it now, 6 months? Almost 6 months, right? Yeah. They could have never contemplated when they left, even if they took a risk of going, knowing, because that is the excuse that's been said. People left knowing that this thing was happening. Even if you left knowing this was happening, take it to the highest scale.
They could not have contemplated 6 months outside of their country, away from their homes, away from their loved ones.
Under these conditions. They could not have contemplated that this would be the situation. Yeah. And as I said, there has to be a balance. Yeah. There has to be a balance with democracy. Yeah?
A state has a responsibility, as you said, to protect its citizens.
Yes.
And that is what they would have done in March. Well, I think it was in March when the borders were closed.
Yeah.
But a democracy also means the protection of a minority over the will of the majority. That is a clear example of this.
Well, that's it. You've hit the nail on the head there. The government has acted to protect the majority of citizens within its borders. Yeah. They've implemented these measures and they've closed the borders to protect us. Yeah. That is the justification. Yeah. There are a minority of persons outside who need to get in, and they have rights that have to be protected as well. And in a democracy, we have to respect minority rights as well.
Yeah.
So that, in my view, you cannot have a absolute ban or absolute prohibition taking place. And certainly whatever system of repatriation is in effect right now, it's not working, or it's very ineffective, because you still have a significant number of citizens that are stranded trying to get home.
Yeah.
And whatever relief is being provided, I don't think that could compensate you for being away from your home, being away from your family, being away from your bed, for that period of time, unjustifiably.
And that is where we get into, I mean, we have some notes here. We start to talk about constitutional principles. We talk about proportionality.
Yeah.
And we talk about, in this instance now, we need to see what is proportionate in these circumstances.
Yeah.
And that is where Kyle is getting to. These people, our citizens, our brothers and sisters who are away, they could not have reasonably contemplated this.
No, and you see, so proportionality is legalese or legal terms used by lawyers simply to talk about balance. You have to balance the need to protect society from this virus, also with the rights and freedoms of citizens on a whole, but certainly those citizens who are stranded abroad.
Yeah.
And, you know, in my view, moving away a little from the law, in my view, I think too often we look at issues with a lens. So we look at issues, firstly, sometimes from a selfish perspective, rightfully so. Some of us would have looked at, and I admit, maybe me at one point in time, we would have looked at this issue and said, well, look, we have to protect ourselves. They're out of the country. Unfortunately, that's unfortunate for them, but my health is important. And that's fine. You've looked at it selfishly. Some people also put on a political lens, as we all know, and look at it from a political perspective, and that's fine too. Okay. But at some point, as responsible citizens in the sovereign democratic state of Trinidad and Tobago, you have to look at the bigger picture. You have to understand that there are people out there that are afraid, they are alone, they are suffering, they don't know what's happening to them, and they need to get back home. Yeah. And at some point, as citizens, we have to stand up, not for what we think should be done, but sometimes you have to stand up for what is right. What is right? And there can be no question, in my view.
What is right in
these circumstances? And that we must have some type of escalated system to get them back home.
Because when you look at these, as Kyle would have stated or alluded to previously, these citizens would have started to form groups. When you go on Facebook or any of the social media or any of the news networks and you see what some of our own brothers and sisters are saying, some of them, I've looked at it in preparation for this show, some of them don't even know where their next meal is coming from.
Yeah, yeah.
And some of them don't know where they're going to sleep next week because, as Kyle said, some of their family members may have need for the room, or some of the strangers that are so gracefully accepted our own citizens in. I mean, they may have to use their home system.
Stefan, we cannot continue to depend on the goodwill of people abroad for our citizens. At some point in time,
we need to do what is right.
Our country has to take responsibility for its citizens, and in my view, it is an egregious act of cruelty to continue to excommunicate our citizens from our country and from their homes and from their families and loved ones. It is simply unacceptable at this point. And I think our discussion the conversation, while there is concern, it hasn't hit that frenzied point that would force the government to ramp up their efforts to bring these people home. And I think hopefully our discussion could contribute to that. Yeah. Hopefully our discussion and our calls could start to bring this issue to a fever pitch type of pinnacle discussion.
Where the Minister of National Security and the Prime Minister of that could take and put some measures in place so that we could bring back home our brothers and sisters.
Yeah.
I mean, I cannot fathom being away from my home, my family, my friends, my bed, as Kyle said. Don't undermine what importance your own bed stands for you.
And that's it. The law is clear.
The law is clear.
You have to look at it from a constitutional perspective.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, the Constitution, the common law, international law, recognizes the rights of these people to return home.
It is beyond dispute, as you would have said.
It is beyond dispute, according to Lord Bingham. It is beyond dispute that this is a right that has always been recognized. We need to respect people's rights regardless of the situation here.
Yeah.
We have to find the right balance, and I think while initially you may have had justification for an absolute lockdown, an absolute prohibition, at this point in time, steps have to be taken to ramp up the effort to bring our citizens back home.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're going to take a short break, a very short break, and we'll get back into another topic, the form of taxation and its effect and role in our sovereign democratic state.
Hey, Dilip Dinesh Maharaj here, wondering what your weekends are like. Are you with friends and family, on the roads, at work? Well, wherever you are, join with me on Radio Jagriti 102.7 FM for the weekend program Salona. Salona brings to you a wonderful selection of music ranging from religious, folk, golden classics and Bollywood hits to keep your company as you enjoy your weekend and prepare for the week ahead. Join me on Radio Jagriti 102.7 FM every Saturday and Sunday from 9 p.m. and Mondays from 10 p.m. till 12 midnight for your cup of Salona, a musical experience to satiate your musical thirst and desires.
I am Kavita Bahal. Join me for Trending Views this and every Tuesday from 8:30 to 9:30 a.m. and for our repeat episodes every Saturday from 11:30 to 12:30 p.m. Trending Views aims to provide information to you viewers based on political, social and economic factors within Trinidad and Tobago. Stay tuned.
Welcome back to section 1, and we move very swiftly along to another topic in the forum, that is taxation.
Taxation. So, the budget has been read. A lot of people will be looking at their pockets, looking at their dime, looking at their income. And of course, we've had one of the measures being introduced in the budget in relation to the elevation of the tax ceiling. I believe Stefan is much more okra with this, with the jargon there, so he would go through it with you. From a constitutional perspective, I think it's important for people to understand firstly that there's a very ancient tradition in common law and in our constitutional system about taxation. Essentially, there can be no taxation unless Parliament authorizes it. Very long ago in England, a king attempted to raise taxes in order to wage a war, and that there was essentially a reformation of that system which led to Parliament holding the king responsible for taxation. And that has led to a whole offspring of law in England and in some regards in our jurisdiction, where statutory bodies and other agencies have attempted to raise, under the guise of a fee, calling it a fee or a license fee or administrative fee, attempted to actually introduce taxation without parliamentary approval. And in many cases, some in England, that fee has been struck down because you didn't have the express authorization of Parliament, and that fee really turned out to be a tax. And I think that is something important, especially now. We as citizens have to be vigilant about the additional fees that state bodies and associations and that may attempt to introduce into the services they provide to citizens. And I think we have to be vigilant about that. One of the areas of taxation, of course, is income tax. I think Stefan will talk to you a bit about that. There's also customs duty, which is a form of taxation that you pay when you import goods. And I will try to explain in some regard that area of tax very quickly. And I think our focus is really, we just want people to be vigilant about these things and really keep be aware of some of the remedies that you could enforce
that
to
is
protect
available to
yourselves.
you.
Yeah. So
Yeah, and that is where we want to get into. We want to ensure that the citizens understand the remedies that are available to you in relation to these taxes. Now, as Kyle said, one of the hot topics really is the customs duties that are being charged on people right now, being levied on
yeah,
people.
because we have a very high import society.
Correct.
So we import things. A lot of our businesses import things to resell in Trinidad and Tobago. And so what you have is a system of taxation duties. But I'll deal with that after. Stephanie, you could deal with income tax.
What Kyle alluded to before was in the budget presentation, the Honorable Minister of Finance would have indicated that there is now an increase in the personal allowance. So the personal increase has moved from $72,000 per year to now $84,000 per year.
What does that mean? That's the question.
That means if you're earning $7,000 a month, that will your total allowance will be $84,000 for the year. You will be exempted from paying income tax.
So I think you need to break that down a little more. So I earn $84,000 a year.
Yeah.
Do I pay tax or don't I pay
You
tax?
don't pay tax because that is the exemption.
Yeah.
And now anything above that,
Right.
you are liable for taxation.
And what
for
is the
income
rate
tax.
and what-
25% at this point in time. So 25%, and you are taxed at a rate of 25%.
Now, previously it was 70.
I am not certain.
Right, but it's moved to 84 now. Yeah.
Yes, correct. No, previously it was $72,000.
Right,
you're
correct,
saying.
yeah. So it's
and
moved-
now it's $84,000.
Okay, good.
And what I wanted to bring to the attention of some of the viewers is some of the deductions
Right.
that you could use to lower the tax.
So this is assisting some viewers to make legitimate deductions
Correct.
from the taxes they pay to save them some money. And I think
Yes.
this is kind of information that you only get from, let's say, an accountant when you go to fill out. And oftentimes, it's happened to me, right? It's oftentimes that only when I go to pay the tax, I say, oh shucks, I could have saved money here, there, and there.
Yeah.
If I had kept a receipt.
If you had
I had kept a receipt
So a lot
or
of-
a letter.
A lot
right?
of yes. So now for the majority of the viewing public, so we'll take civil servants for example, or anyone working for a salary.
Right.
Where you have to fill out a TD4. Once you're working for a salary and that allowance is that salary is over $84,000 and you're liable to pay, these are some of the deductions that you can use to legitimately lower the amount of tax that you need to pay.
Right, so
One of them, importantly, I put this at number 1, is a tertiary education expense. Right? Now this claim may be made in respect of yourself, your spouse, or your child. A lot of people don't know this, but you can fill this out on your form. Now, in order to qualify for this claim, the course of studies must for at least the duration of 1 academic year or 2 semesters, and be at a level beyond A levels.
So I am
it
paying
must
tax.
be-
So I am paying tax on a sum over $84,000.
Yeah.
One of the things that I could claim as a deduction to the amount of tax that I pay is if either myself, my wife, or child is engaged or enrolled in
tertiary level education.
Good.
And the important part is it must be above A levels, right? Tertiary level education.
Second.
And then we go to contributions and approved pension fund and plan, where you have contributions towards your own pension plan.
Right.
And it must not, the relief is granted for an annual contribution made to the taxpayer up to $50,000.
Okay, so I'm paying tax, and if I enter into, I have started a contributory pension plan.
Yeah.
I can enjoy a deduction from the amount of taxation I
Correct.
pay. Good.
Correct.
Right.
Now, when we
Understood.
get into
This is
sole
learning. This is learning experience. This is a
For
learning
you.
experience for me now.
and when we get into sole traders, or what you may appreciate, Kyle,
Yeah.
professionals, young professionals, any professional, doctors, lawyers, engineers, those who work for themselves, particularly in a sole trader.
Yeah.
What you get into now is expenses that are earned, expenses that are levied upon you throughout the course of your income, throughout the earning of your income.
Right.
So, for example, we pay office expenses,
Yeah.
office rent.
Yeah.
Those things are deductible. And when you go into, but importantly, Kyle and I had a discussion before, it is important when you're doing this as a sole trader or professional to keep your receipts.
Yeah.
Right?
I'm particularly bad at
Keeping receipts.
documentation. I think most people could attest to that.
Yeah.
So it's a struggle.
So any expense that you would have incurred while making your income, you can use that as a deductible, and that is important.
What about gas?
Well, gas is a touchy topic.
Right.
And let me explain. Traveling officers, for example, civil servants, you must have approval from the Board of Inland Revenue for that.
Okay.
And so not anybody could just say, look, I had to pay $200
Sure.
in premium to fill up my gas,
Okay.
and that is deductible. No.
Well, that I think it's going to be very important now, especially with the rise in
Yeah.
fuel prices. I think a lot of people will want to look at that area of law and get the necessary approvals if you don't have it.
Yes, correct.
Yeah.
And now, and we'll get into now, what are some of your remedies?
Right.
Now, a lot of times.
So if I dispute, I
if
want to
you are disputing a tax,
Right.
right? The BIR, the Board of Inland Revenue, has levied an assessment on you and says, look, you have to pay X amount of dollars, $10,000 in tax, and you disagree with that. There is options available to you. The first option is that you go through something called the objection stage, where you file an objection with the Board of Inland Revenue. You have up to 24 months to provide expenses, all of your receipts, your evidence to dispute the assessment.
And that is filed with the Board of Inland Revenue.
That is the first step.
Right.
And the viewers must know it is incumbent upon you to provide that evidence. Right?
Okay.
The onus is on you, as we say in law, to provide that evidence to prove that the assessment is wrong.
So you have to ensure that you keep your documentation.
You have to, Kyle, as you said,
Yeah.
you're pretty bad at that one.
Yeah.
Right? And then moving along from the objection stage, if it is that your objection is rejected,
Right.
and many discussions I've had with individuals outside the realm of law don't even know that we have something in Trinidad called the Tax Appeal Board.
Tax Appeal Board.
And the Tax Appeal Board is a court that it rules on issues such as this. Once you have an objection that you do not agree with, and your objection has been refused, you can go to the Tax Appeal Board.
How do you initiate the appeal in the Tax Appeal Board?
You file an appeal within 6 months.
Right.
And so you have 6 months from the date of your assessment to file the appeal in the Tax Appeal Court.
This appeal is a special form. Is it a document that you just file?
And importantly, this is the point I want to raise.
Yeah.
Many times I've gone to the Tax Appeal Board and I have seen more than half of the persons in court, they do not have a lawyer. You know why? Because it's very simple to initiate this process.
So you don't need a lawyer.
You do not need a lawyer to
Good.
initiate
Very
this
good,
process. You go into the Tax Appeal Board and you file something called a Notice of Appeal. A Notice of Appeal is very similar to what you have now with your objection stage. You're saying why you are right, your evidence to provide before the
You
board.
simply get a document, set it out in a sort of intelligible way,
Correct.
saying why you feel that your tax ought to have been assessed in a certain way.
Yeah, and as I said, I have seen the majority of people there do not have lawyers. They're what we call in law litigants in person.
Right.
You appeal and you go through the process of proving why you are right.
I think that's a very important thing to know. I know it from the customs and
From the customs end. We can move on to the customs part
right.
now.
So as I was saying, duties levied on goods that are imported into the country. A lot of businesses, a lot of people bring in goods. What usually happens, Stefan, is what you're supposed to be taxed on is the value of the good that is brought in. And in the Customs Act, you have percentages, which are percentages of taxation that is levied depending on the type
Rates
of
of
good,
import duties.
Rates of import duties. And that is set out in the Customs Act.
Yeah.
And most people who bring in goods know the rate of duty.
Yeah.
What usually happens and where the problem happens, Stefan, is when you come to valuation. So you bring in an item, you may have a receipt in your possession. More than likely, you would have a receipt or an invoice in your possession. You bring the item in, it comes to customs, you value it at $10, and then what happens? Sometimes a customs officer or official would look at it good and say, well, I don't think that is valued at $10, I think that's $100.
Yeah.
So you need to pay your percentage of your rate of duty on $100 as opposed to $10, which of course is very significant. It sends up the price of that the good will be resold for, and it reduces your business margins. What do you do? And just as some quick practical advice, the way that you deal with that is also at the Tax Appeal Board, as Stefan was saying. There's something called Evaluation Division in Customs where they look at it and you get into a debate as to the value of the good. But what is important to remember is that you pay your rate of duty on something called the transactional value.
That is important.
It is not what the customs officer values the good at. You have to be taxed on what you actually paid for that good. So that if you have evidence of a receipt, if you have evidence of a wire transfer, a check, a credit card charge, to show that you actually paid $10 for the goods then the customs officer cannot come and unilaterally impose a price or a value that he sees fit. I've often heard the story that some officers say, well, look, I saw the thing that you are brought in on Google or on Amazon for X price. How come you get it cheaper? And the fact is that people negotiate. People buy in bulk.
You have business relationships.
You may get it cheaper. So your rate of duty is really to be assessed on the value and on what you pay, the transactional value. Only in cases where there is evidence of some fraud or dishonesty in terms of the receipt, and that has to be proven by very serious evidence. Only in those circumstances can a customs officer say, well, look, I want to now assess this value on something else. And there's something in the Customs Act called the 6th Schedule.
Yep.
We'll put it up on the Facebook website.
Facebook page.
You can look at it. And what it sets out is a methodology for assessing these imported items. And it's sequential. And by sequential methodology, all I mean to say is there's one method of assessing. If you cannot use that, you move on to the second and third. The second method is they will look for goods that have been imported that are similar in nature, or identical in nature, and then similar in nature within a period of time, and look at the value of those goods. But what is important is that you, as the importer, whether it be business, private, or personal, you as the importer, keep your receipt, keep your method of payment.
Whether it be wire transfer,
credit card, however you have paid,
and
keep
your
that
invoice
for production. And if an assessment, an erroneous assessment is made, you have the option. Under Section 22 of the Customs Act, you can pay a deposit, because oftentimes you have your goods stranded. They're being held outside. You're paying duty. You're paying all sorts of charges.
Demurrage
fees, container fees, storage. And so you need to get your goods. You simply say, I want to pay a deposit. I want to dispute the valuation. I want to pay a deposit. You pay the deposit. When you get that assessment notice, that is what you use to go to the tax appeal board. Again, you don't need a lawyer. Go to the tax appeal board, say you want to lodge an appeal, and let customs or the officer come and say or prove how they came up with their valuation.
Yes, and just to close off this very quickly, you have 6 months in which you can lodge that
6
assessment.
months in which to
I made a very small error in the last one. That was in customs I was talking about.
Yeah.
When you're speaking about the Board of Inland Revenue, you have 28 days from the date of the objection decision.
20
so
days.
6 months for customs.
6 months for customs, 28 days.
Right?
Yeah?
So what we'll do now is take a very short break, and we'll come back to deposition with our two guests from the Human Rights Committee of the Law Association
and from Cause and Effect.
From Cause and Effect.